Don't come any closer, he said, voice trembling beneath forced bravado. His boot heels scraped the dusty deck of the abandoned station, and in the flicker of half-veiled overhead lights, the woman standing across from him looked distinctly amused. There was something uncanny about her features, a glow beneath her skin, like faint bioluminescence dancing under a sheer surface. Her eyes were not the usual human shape. They were angled, pupils elongated, reflecting the dim light in a shimmering display. Her mouth curved into what he could only interpret as a grin, though the expression had an edge to it that made his stomach tighten. She cocked her head, revealing a faint tracery of luminescent lines along her neck. "I'm not moving," she replied, in a voice rich with curiosity. "But I can feel your fear." She lifted a hand, showing fingers tipped in soft pads that also glowed. "Is this the stance humans take when they're ready to flee? Or perhaps pounce?" He swallowed, trying to keep control of his breath. He hadn't met an alien quite like her before, and in his line of work, he'd seen a few. He forced a laugh, though it came out bitter and flat. "Trust me, lady, I'm not going to pounce on anything right now." He resisted the urge to shift his footing again. Once upon a time, he'd been a decent pilot and a halfway decent scavenger for the free ports along the star routes, but the war had changed that. He didn't trust easily anymore. "Who are you?" She blinked slowly, as though tasting the question. "You ask so many direct things," she said, and her glowing lines flickered in a subtle pattern that drew his eyes. "You can call me Lorena. Or just Lyra, if you find it easier." Her grin widened fractionally, those strange eyes scanning him from head to toe. "Tell me something first. Why are you shaking? Did you see me and assume danger? Or is it something else?" "Name's Taryn," he said. His voice was hoarse, lacking the assertiveness he intended. "Look, I'm not used to folks creeping around derelict outposts uninvited. We don't all run around glowing either." He licked his lips, scanning the broken corridor for any sign of additional threats. "I came here searching for salvage. The station was supposed to be empty." She took a single step forward, and he fought the reflex to raise his sidearm. Instead, he let it hang at his hip, uncertain whether it would even work on her. "If it was meant to be empty, you should be more careful," she remarked. "Slavers have been poking around here. Or so I've heard." Her voice dropped, a slight hush over the words that made him think she'd encountered them before. "You could get caught in their net. I don't think you'd enjoy that," he scoffed. "I'm not exactly prime slave material. And I know how to hide. If anyone's going to get snatched around here, it's a walking light bulb." The insult wasn't kind, but he was too on edge to choose his words gently. Her expression changed, and the lines along her neck pulsed in sequence with what seemed like anger or some tension. Yet she didn't move away. "You would be surprised," she said, voice suddenly quiet. "I've seen your kind dragged into forced labor just as often as mine. Even if you don't glow." She turned her head, letting her strange hair, like filaments that caught every stray beam of light, shift over her shoulders. "I'm trying to keep to the shadows. That's why I was here. But then I sensed your presence." Her gaze roamed over him again, more clinical this time. "They left a trap in the lower bays. You nearly set it off." He exhaled. "So you're telling me you saved me from it?" He braced for a sarcastic note in her reply, but it didn't come. Instead, she just studied him, as though trying to figure out if there was any benefit to honesty. He noticed how she stood, balanced, ready to move at a moment's notice. She wasn't lying about being wary of slavers. She looked poised for flight or fight, and despite her graceful appearance, there was an underlying tension in her posture that spoke of deep survival instincts. "I guess I owe you," Taryn muttered, heart still hammering, "for the heads up." She drew in a breath, and the faint glow under her skin intensified for a moment, like a wave of color. "Then repay me by staying quiet as we move. If they're patrolling the station, we need to find a safer place to talk. Agreed?" She raised an eyebrow, as though that was the only acceptable deal. He nodded. "Fine. But no funny business." Then, feeling awkward, he added, "I don't do well with trust." If it comes to it, I'll shoot. I'm not above that. She glanced at his sidearm and then back up at him. A wry smile tugged at the edges of her mouth. Shoot me, and you'll ruin your best chance of getting out of this place alive. She turned and, without a backward look, started walking. Come on, Taryn. Show me how quietly you can move. He followed, heart thrumming with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant fascination. Her footsteps were silent as she led him through the corridor. The station's emergency lights flickered, and each time the corridor momentarily darkened, her body provided its own illumination. The graceful outlines of her figure were thrown into gentle silhouette, and every so often, Taryn found his gaze drifting along her spine, where faint traceries of glowing patterns twisted and coiled. He felt a strange pull, some mix of curiosity, and the primal reaction to something so very different from himself. Even in the thick tension of possible danger, the edge of attraction unsettled him. He tried to focus on the walls, the pipes, the dusty corners, anything but her. They stopped near a sealed doorway with half the panel shorted out. She tapped a key on the control panel, and it hissed open just enough for them to slip inside. The room was cramped, likely some storage closet once upon a time, with old crates stacked against the walls. She reached for her own small handheld device, tapping in a code that forced the door to seal from the inside. Then she flicked off her external glow, leaving them in the faint red emergency light overhead. She gestured. Better for hiding. Less light. Or are you afraid of the dark? She seemed almost playful now, as if the adrenaline of the corridor chase had lowered her guard just a fraction. He let out a breath. Not afraid, just cautious. He studied her face in the dark. The angles of her cheeks, the lines of faint luminescence that still pulsed under her skin with her breath. I've never met someone like you, he admitted quietly. What are you? That is. He paused, ashamed at how crude he sounded. I mean, which species are you from? I've traveled a lot, never seen someone with quite your traits. She didn't seem offended. I'm from the Aliris, though I imagine we're not a household name in human space. We're people of the deeper star lanes, originally. Now we're scattered. Some of us adapt, living among other races. Some, like me, can't help but stand out. She lifted her chin. We're also a proud people once. Now we have to hide. He leaned back against a crate. Hiding from slavers? She hesitated, crossing her arms over her chest. Not just them. My people were targeted by a corporate syndicate that found the properties of our bioluminescence useful. Some of us get captured because we can produce certain chemicals, or because our glows can be harnessed. Others, like me, refuse to let that happen. The slavers that roam these old stations don't discriminate. They can sell us all. Humans, Aliris, anything that bleeds. He studied her expression, noticing the flicker of bitterness. So you're on the run, or in exile, or… He trailed off, uncertain how personal to get. He'd known many refugees in his time. He'd sometimes sold them passage in the cargo bay of his small ship for a modest fee, if only to keep himself fueled for the next job. But he'd never encountered an Aliris. He found himself feeling a pang of sympathy, and the emotion was unfamiliar, uncomfortable. She didn't flinch. I'm not ashamed of my circumstances. I was once a guardian for my people. I led scouting missions, monitored potential threats. But I lost them, or they lost me. Her brow furrowed at the memory. Now, the best I can do is survive. So that maybe someday, if others are out there free, we can band together again. He found himself nodding before he realized it. Fair enough. He shifted, feeling the cramped space pressing in on them. His body hummed with tension, or maybe it was just her presence. You mentioned something about pulling out a trap. He tried to recall exactly what she'd said. Or was it that you said they left a trap, something about pulling out a catch? I might have misheard. His question was half-baked, but it was that phrase that had rung strangely in his ears when she first mentioned it. Her lips parted, confusion evident. Pulling out? I heard some humans talking about it once. They used the phrase about something physical. I thought it referred to removing a device from a sealed container, so I borrowed the phrase. Is that not correct? He flushed unexpectedly. Well, we do sometimes call it that, but it can also mean something else. Something a little more intimate. His cheeks warmed. You probably don't want to. Her eyebrows lifted. But now I'm curious. So there's a second meaning? A taboo or something? I heard it used in hushed conversation a few times in a bar. I never understood it. Is it dangerous? She sounded genuine in her intrigue, which only made his chest tighten with embarrassment. In the claustrophobic space, he couldn't hide the flush in his face. It's a human thing that usually has to do with, sexual stuff. He cleared his throat, keenly aware of how close she stood. She stared at him with that unwavering gaze, and he swore she got some enjoyment out of his discomfort. During intimacy. She pursed her lips. I see. So you pull out in the middle of intimacy. That's a normal practice among your kind? Her voice was hushed, but she didn't look away. He didn't want to talk about it. At the same time, a bizarre wave of attraction stirred in him. Her curiosity was so frank, untainted by the usual human embarrassment. It's more complicated than that. It's not exactly polite conversation. And definitely not relevant right now, since we're hiding from slavers who could bust through that door any second. She nodded, though the corner of her mouth curved up in something like a smile. You humans are always so shy about certain topics. Very well, keep your secrets. Then she exhaled softly, as if to ground herself in the moment. We can slip out of here once the patrol passes. Then, if you'd like, I'll show you how to navigate the lower decks without triggering the proximity alarms. You might even find your salvage. Deal? He nodded. I guess that's a plan. I've got a small shuttle parked near the station's docking ring. If it's still secure, we can both get out of here. Because I'm guessing you don't exactly have a ride or you wouldn't be skulking around in the dark. He caught a flicker of annoyance on her face, but she didn't deny it. If you have a ship, that could solve a few issues, she said. But first, let's handle the immediate threat. I don't intend to be sold. She stared at him, and he felt the intensity of her words settle between them. He recognized the determination in her face. She'd fight tooth and nail before letting them take her. A quiet admiration sparked inside him, though he pushed it down. He'd known too many people in his life who needed saving. He wasn't sure he had it in him to be a rescuer anymore. Yet her presence tugged at old instincts. They waited, the silence stretching. In that hush, he became hyper-aware of her breathing, the subtle shift of her posture. She seemed unconsciously attuned to the environment, every few seconds tilting her head to listen for footsteps or scanning the door with those shimmering eyes. At one point, the red emergency lights flickered off for a few seconds, plunging them into pitch black, and in that moment, her luminescent patterns glowed with soft pulses, painting her face in ethereal lines. Taryn's heart thudded at the sheer otherworldly sight of it. When the overhead lights sputtered back on, she jerked her head toward the door. We should go now. They've moved on. She tapped her device, and the door slid open by a crack. Carefully, she peered into the corridor. Satisfied it was empty, she nodded at him. Come on. He followed her out, letting her lead. She moved with the surety of someone who knew the station layout, or at least had scouted it thoroughly. He found himself studying the slope of her shoulders, the graceful curve of her hips that was visible even under simple, utilitarian clothing. Her species obviously shared some morphological similarities with humans, enough that he recognized her general shape. Yet everything else about her was alien, the filaments that replaced typical human hair, the faint patterns of color that rippled under her skin, the elongated eyes. Despite himself, he found those differences fascinating, stirring a raw curiosity he hadn't felt in a long while. They paused at an intersection with two directions leading into deeper hallways. She reached back, gently grasping his hand, startling him with the warmth of her skin. Her luminescence cast a subtle glow over his knuckles. She pulled him into the right corridor silently, pressing herself against the wall. He did the same, trying not to focus on how close she was. She smelled vaguely of something sweet and fresh, like a meadow dew, but laced with a faint mineral tang that reminded him of the sea. She glanced over her shoulder at him. "You good?" He nodded, words suddenly failing him. She turned back, and they eased along, the corridor's overhead fixtures humming ominously. Soon, they rounded a corner into a wide room cluttered with defunct machinery and scattered crates. His heart leapt into his throat when he spotted two hulking figures near a stack of metal cargo boxes across the space. They wore mismatched armor, the sort typical of ragtag slavers. One of them was fiddling with a datapad while the other stood watch, a rifle slung over one shoulder. Lyra pressed herself back against Terran, forcing him to duck behind a column of fused pipes. She gently placed her hand over his where it rested on the grip of his sidearm, urging him not to draw it. Her lips brushed close to his ear, and the whisper of her breath sent a strange thrill through him. "Wait!" she mouthed. He held his breath, listening to the muffled conversation of the slavers. They were complaining about the lack of quality goods in this station. One mentioned a rumor about an exotic glow lady they'd been paid to track down. Terran tensed, feeling the adrenaline spike at the knowledge they were onto her. The second slaver said something about blowing the place if they can't find any decent cargo. A spike of panic clenched Terran's gut. If they had explosives, they might sabotage or destroy the station to smoke out any fugitives. That would put his shuttle at risk, not to mention endanger both him and Lyra. She stayed perfectly still, eyes closed as though focusing on every echo, until the slavers finished complaining and trudged off through a different exit, footsteps resonating on the metal deck. Only then did she open her eyes and exhale. Terran nodded at her, mindful to keep silent. They waited another long minute before carefully skirting around the perimeter of the room, heading toward the door on the opposite side. Every nerve in Terran's body was wound tight, half expecting the slavers to double back at any moment. Once they were safely in the corridor beyond, Lyra allowed herself a small, silent laugh, the tension of the near miss crackling between them. He found her eyes on him again, and there was something in that look, relief, maybe gratitude, or something else. He cleared his throat, remembering the plan. "The docking ring is this way," he murmured, jerking his head toward a corridor that sloped downward. "I can get us both out. I just need to make sure my shuttle's not compromised." She nodded. "Lead on. I'm right behind you." His heart gave a traitorous little jump when he felt the gentle press of her fingertips at the small of his back, urging him forward. He reminded himself this was strictly about survival. Nothing more. But he couldn't deny the undercurrent of energy that coursed through him whenever she touched him. They wove through labyrinthine hallways, passing collapsed ceilings and scorch marks from old battles long since abandoned. Terran guessed that, decades ago, this station was a refueling outpost, or a trade hub. Now it was just a husk, used only by scavengers and criminals. He'd come here hoping for an easy haul of spare parts, maybe a few crates of leftover supplies to sell. Instead, he'd stumbled into a situation that felt more personal by the moment. He tried to keep his mind on the present. Slavers. Danger. Escape. That was enough. Finally, they reached a corridor lined with huge, hollow windows looking out into the star-dotted darkness. At the far end, a heavy blast door separated the corridor from the docking ring. Terran felt a twist of worry. If the slavers had found his shuttle, they might be waiting for him. He crept up to the door, pulling a battered portable scanner from his pocket to check for life signs on the other side. The readout flickered. 2 signals. "Damn," he muttered. "They're in there." He gestured for Lyra to see, and she pressed close, shoulders brushing his. "Are you sure it's them?" she whispered. He nodded. "I'd guess so. We'll have to be careful. Or we find another docking bay with a ship we can steal, assuming any are left. But the ring is small, just a few berths. My shuttle is the only one I saw when I came aboard." He peered down the corridor, as though seeking an alternative. "We might try to sneak around or ambush them, depending on how they position themselves." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "We might not need a full-blown fight. Let me see if I can draw them out, or distract them, so you can slip in and secure the ship. Then I'll join you. He scowled, not liking the risk. That's dangerous. What if they grab you? Her lips thinned. I won't let them. I can handle it. But you'll need to be fast. Once you're in your shuttle, power it up and be ready to go. I can slip aboard once they take the bait, or if I need to, I'll find my own path. But I'd rather we not be separated. It's safer together, yes? She gave him that wry look again, as though reading the conflict on his face. He nodded slowly, a swirl of emotion stirring in his chest. He hated letting someone else put themselves on the line. But time was short, and the risk was real. All right. But if anything goes wrong, I'm coming out guns blazing. She smiled, that soft glow under her skin brightening. Don't worry. I've danced with these sorts of men before. Then, before he could respond, she handed him a small device, like a disc with swirling inscriptions. Take this. If things get truly dire, press the center. It's a pulse that might scramble their scanners and buy you a few seconds. Also, it might overload your own systems, so use it only as a last resort. He accepted it, swallowing hard. Got it. She leaned in slightly, close enough that he caught that sweet, mineral scent again. She was about to say something more, but he felt his heart skip when her gaze flicked to his mouth. For an odd moment, he thought she might kiss him, and a wave of hot confusion crashed over him. But then she stepped back, face unreadable. Wish me luck, she said softly. He nodded, words failing him. She slipped away, lithe and quiet. He pressed himself against the wall, waiting to see how she planned to distract two armed slavers. His gut twisted in apprehension. Lyra disappeared around the corner, leaving him alone. In the silence, he tried to steady his breathing, the memory of her warmth still in the forefront of his mind. He didn't want to admit how deeply she was getting under his skin. He barely knew her. But something about her presence ignited his senses, made him feel more alive than he had in a long time. A muffled shout from behind the blast door told him her plan was already in motion. He edged closer, pressing an ear to the cold metal. Through the thick barrier, he could just make out a conversation, though he couldn't pick out the words. The tone of the men's voices rose in surprise. Then one of them barked an order. He heard a clatter, then footsteps echoing away. Taryn took the chance, keying in his override on the door's control panel and slipping through when it hissed open. The docking bay was dimly lit, with crates and fuel hoses scattered around. His shuttle was parked at the far side, a small, well-worn craft that barely merited the name. He could see one slaver in battered armor heading to the left side of the bay, likely chasing after Lyra. The other was scanning the shadows, a pistol in hand. Taryn ducked behind a fuel tank, cursing under his breath. He needed to get into his ship before they noticed him. Where was Lyra? He worried that she was pinned somewhere or captured, but he forced that thought aside. She needed him to do his part. He crept forward, pausing each time the slaver turned his head. At one point, the man's eyes nearly fell on him, but Taryn lowered himself behind a tall crate just in time, heart hammering. He inched closer, step by step, until he was only a few yards from the shuttle's ramp. Through a gap in the crates, he saw the second slaver jogging deeper into the far corners, chasing something that darted just out of reach. That had to be Lyra. Her luminous patterns would be easy to spot if she wanted them to see her. The first slaver approached the shuttle's nose, scanning the area. Taryn had no choice. He needed to move now, or risk them discovering him. He activated the small disc Lyra had given him, pressing it gently, just enough to produce a faint flicker of energy. Lights across the bay blinked, and the slaver cursed, tapping his helmet as though trying to fix a malfunction. Taryn seized the moment, sprinting to the side of the shuttle, ducking under the hull. Adrenaline roared in his veins. He slapped the ramp control, and it began to lower with a mechanical whine. Halfway down, it caught the slaver's attention, who whirled around, leveling his pistol. Taryn fired first, a single shot from his sidearm. The bright flash of plasma grazed the man's armor. The slaver yelped, rolling behind a crate. Taryn scrambled up the partially lowered ramp and into the shuttle's interior, slapping the controls to seal it behind him. Another shot from the slaver pinged off the hull, leaving a scorch mark. Taryn scrambled to the cockpit, cursing. He could hear faint alarms on the console, warning of power fluctuations. He flicked switches to start the engines, ignoring the abrupt jerk of the ship's systems as they tried to boot. Come on, he muttered. Outside, he heard more gunfire. He prayed Lyra was all right. He had no idea how she intended to board. The shuttle's engines whined to life, lights on the console blinking from red to green. Yes, he hissed. Then he activated the exterior cameras, scanning for any sign of her. There, he caught a glimpse of a glowing figure darting behind cargo stacks, pursued by the second slaver. The first was now pounding on the shuttle's ramp, trying to override the lock. Taryn hissed in frustration. He had to help her, or at least give her an opening. Maybe if he opened the cargo hatch on the side, she could slip in. He keyed in the sequence, and a side panel slid open, wide enough for a person to dive through if they managed to get close. The slaver pounding on the ramp noticed, turning his attention to the opening. Taryn fired up the small turret on the shuttle's undercarriage. He rarely used it, but it was his best shot at scaring them off. With the press of a button, the turret swiveled, unleashing a warning blast. The shot scorched the floor near the slaver's feet, causing him to leap back with a shouted curse. Meanwhile, Lyra darted around the edges of the crates, luminous patterns flaring bright. The second slaver aimed at her with a rifle. Taryn felt his stomach lurch. He quickly maneuvered the turret, carefully adjusting his aim so as not to hit her. He squeezed the trigger at the last second, sending a bolt of plasma sizzling into the crate next to the slaver. The crate exploded in a shower of sparks, toppling the man to the ground. Lyra didn't hesitate. She sprinted full tilt toward the shuttle's side hatch. Taryn watched as she leapt, arms outstretched, luminescent lines blazing with adrenaline. She caught the rim of the opening, scrambling to pull herself inside. The first slaver took a desperate shot, which ricocheted off the hull. Taryn winced as her body jerked, almost losing her grip, but she managed to tumble in, gasping. He hammered the control to seal the hatch. The engines roared. He keyed the thrusters. The shuttle lurched away from the docking clamps with a teeth-rattling groan. Then, with a final shriek of metal, they were free, drifting into open space. He let out a whoop of relief, adrenaline pounding in his ears. Lyra staggered into the cockpit behind him, panting. Blood trickled down her upper arm, her glowing patterns flickering erratically. "You're hit!" He jumped out of the pilot's chair, grabbing a first aid kit. She waved him off, pressing her own glowing hand to the wound. "Just a graze," she rasped, though her skin shone with sweat. "Focus on flying. I can handle this." Her gaze met his, and for a moment, in the hum of the cramped shuttle, they locked eyes. The danger of the station melted away, replaced by that raw, tangible spark that had been simmering between them. His lips parted, unsure what to say. She eased herself onto the co-pilot's seat, gripping the console as she tried to steady her breath. Taryn sank back into the pilot's chair, hands shaking slightly. "Got it," he said. "Setting coordinates. Anywhere in particular you want to go, or shall we just get the hell out of here?" She let out a shaky laugh, wincing at the pain in her arm. "Anywhere but there," she said, leaning her head back. "Somewhere quiet. So we can rest." A faint, mischievous smile touched her lips. "And so you can finish explaining that, pulling out phrase." He let out a breath that was half laugh, half disbelief. "You're unbelievable," he said softly. "We almost died back there." She closed her eyes, a trace of humor tugging at her features despite the pain. "Life is short, human. If there's a question burning in my head, I'm not going to forget it just because we stared death in the face." Then her lids lifted, and her gaze fixed on him. "I'm not letting you dodge it forever." He exhaled, adjusting the ship's trajectory. "Fine," he said, voice suddenly thick with more than just relief. "We'll talk. Once we're safe." She nodded, and in the hush that followed, with the stars outside swirling as the shuttle surged away from the derelict station, he felt like fate had just shifted. He wasn't alone anymore. That realization sank deep, sparking equal parts fear and undeniable yearning. One near-death encounter with this woman, and he was already unraveling. He set the autopilot to a safe course. He had no idea what lay ahead, but as he stole a glance at Lyra, her eyes fluttering closed as she tried to manage the pain, he couldn't deny that something profound had already taken root between them. The tension was there, so was the confusion, and definitely the attraction. Maybe it was a bad idea to let it grow, but it felt inevitable. This was a new territory, not just physically or interstellar, but emotionally. He tried to shove that thought aside and focus on basic survival, but deep down, he knew there was no going back to who he was before. Not now that he'd met her. They found refuge on a small, unclaimed planet deep in a remote sector known for its swirling nebulous skies. Taryn had been here once before, a long time ago, when he needed to lay low from a bounty hunter. The planet was mostly rocky plains and hidden cave systems, with a faint but breathable atmosphere. Perfect for short-term refuge. He navigated the shuttle through the misty, rose-colored clouds, scanning for any signs of settlement or hostile life forms. Satisfied that the place was as empty as he remembered, he landed in a shallow canyon where the cliffs would shield the ship from overhead scans. As soon as the engines powered down, Lyra shifted in the co-pilot's seat, grimacing. Taryn rummaged for the med kit, pulling out a disinfectant, bandages, and a small device for scanning wounds. She didn't object as he gently pushed aside the torn sleeve of her shirt, revealing an angry scorch along her shoulder. The glow under her skin had dimmed around the wound, her body seemingly redirecting energy to healing. "Let me take a look," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "It doesn't need much." She protested softly, but her voice lacked strength. Sweat beaded along her temples. "I can handle pain. And Elira's cells regenerate quickly." He pressed the scanner to her arm anyway. The device beeped, confirming it was a superficial burn, but the tissue needed proper treatment. He used a sterile wipe to clean it. She flinched, and he murmured an apology. Then he applied a healing salve, layering a bandage over it. "Try not to move that arm too much," he said, sealing the bandage. "We don't know how different your biology might be. I don't want an infection." Her lips twitched in a faint smile. "You're being sweet." She raised her other hand, trailing a luminescent fingertip across his cheek. He froze, heart stuttering at the sensation, soft, warm, strangely comforting. "Thank you, Taryn?" He swallowed, pulling back slightly, uncertain how to handle the intimacy of the moment. "You're welcome. We're in this together for now." He stood, clearing his throat, and nodded toward the back of the cramped craft where he'd set up a small sleeping bunk. "You should rest. I'll keep watch outside, gather some supplies. The planet is safe enough, but I want to be sure." He needed a moment away from her to gather his spinning thoughts. She reached out and grasped his wrist gently. "Before you go," she said, her voice softer now, "would you mind explaining? About the phrase you mentioned. Pulling out? Is it strictly a precaution for pregnancy, or is it just a technique?" "God," he muttered, flushing hotly. "You really don't let this go, do you?" She shook her head, eyes shining with amusement despite her injury. "You could just say it's not relevant, but I sense it's something that you humans do to avoid certain outcomes, yes? Like preventing a child, or controlling a moment of climax. I only ask because I've overheard it, and I'm trying to understand your culture. It's not so different from certain Eliris methods, I think, but I'm not certain." Taryn ran a hand through his hair, mortified and oddly intrigued by how clinical yet candid she was. "All right, short version, yeah, it's basically a method some people use during sex to avoid, that particular risk. But it's not exactly the best method. It can fail if you're not careful. And honestly, it's not completely comfortable to talk about." He exhaled, bracing for more questions. "Satisfied?" She peered at him. "Mostly. So you'd say it's an unreliable method, used in the heat of the moment because it's simpler than more formal prophylactics?" She tilted her head. "I see. He lifted his hands. I guess, yeah? Look, it's a complicated topic for a conversation in a shuttle that still smells like overheated thrusters. She let a small laugh escape. Understood. But humans have so many ways to dance around taboo subjects. It's fascinating. Her eyes gleamed. No wonder you were so uncomfortable on the station when I mentioned it. You felt it was too intimate to bring up. Believe it or not, I don't usually chat about that kind of thing with strangers, he retorted, though his tone had softened. So yeah, it made me a bit uncomfortable. She hummed thoughtfully, leaning back in the chair. We're not exactly strangers anymore. We've shared danger. We've saved each other's lives, in a sense. She closed her eyes for a moment, exhaling slowly. That counts for something. He stood there, uncertain how to respond, until finally he just nodded. Get some rest. I'll be back soon. He grabbed a small pack and stepped out of the shuttle, the hatch sealing behind him. A rush of cooler, slightly thin air greeted him. The sky overhead glowed in swirling pinks and oranges thanks to the planet's atmosphere refracting the nearby nebula's light. He sucked in a breath, scanning the horizon with his handheld tracker. No signs of humanoid life or large predators. Good. He made a quick circuit around the canyon, checking for vantage points or hidden dangers. None emerged. The place was eerily silent, with a faint wind kicking up red-brown dust. Once satisfied, he found a relatively flat spot of ground not far from the shuttle and sat. He let the tension bleed out of him in the quiet. The last few hours had been a whirlwind, nearly captured by slavers, then fighting for survival, then fleeing with an alien woman who intrigued him more than he cared to admit. He gazed at the shuttle's silhouette against the shimmering sky, replaying the feel of Lyra's luminous hand on his wrist. The quickening of his pulse at her nearness. The raw energy in her gaze. He knew the pitfalls of forging ties too quickly, especially in such dire situations. People latched onto each other in desperation, only to realize later that trust wasn't so easily earned. But part of him wanted to trust her. Maybe it was the bond of shared danger, or maybe it was the subtle glow in her eyes that made him feel seen in a way he hadn't in years. He thought back to his old scars, the betrayals that had led him to a lonely existence of scavenging and running. Was he really prepared to let someone in again, especially someone who came with so much baggage of her own? He rolled his shoulders, wincing at the tightness in his muscles. This was the kind of introspection he usually drowned with cheap liquor or suppressed with half-baked gallows humor. But with no one here but him and this silent canyon, he was forced to face it. Night would fall soon, if this planet even had a typical day-night cycle. He decided to gather some of the local flora. His scanner identified a few plants that were safe for consumption. He found a cluster of spindly shrubs with nutritious tubers that he could peel and roast. It wasn't a gourmet meal, but it would keep them alive. He packed a few into his bag. By the time he returned to the shuttle, the sky was darkening, the temperature dropping. Inside the cramped interior, Lyra was curled up in the co-pilot's seat, eyes closed. The glow under her skin was calmer now, more rhythmic. He approached quietly, not wanting to startle her. But as soon as he stepped in, her eyes fluttered open, those elongated pupils fixing on him. She tried to straighten, stifling a groan. "I see you found something," she murmured, gesturing to his bag. "Just a few tubers. I'll cook them outside. It'll be more comfortable out there than in here," he said. "Come if you feel up to it. Otherwise, you can rest more." She stood gingerly, pressing a hand to her bandaged shoulder. "No, I'd rather not stay cooped up." She followed him out of the shuttle, blinking at the vibrant skies. "This place is beautiful," she said softly, taking in the swirling nebula lighting. Her luminescent lines seemed to react to the environment, glowing more vividly. He watched her face, noting the wonder in her expression. He gathered some rocks in a small circle a few paces from the shuttle, pulling out a portable ignition device to start a controlled flame. The air was thin, but there was enough oxygen for a small fire. Lyra sat across from him, close enough that he could see the reflective shimmer in her eyes whenever she glanced his way. He skewered a couple of the tubers and held them over the flame, letting them roast slowly. For a while either spoke. Eventually, she broke the silence. "You're different from other humans I've met." She tilted her head. "In a good way, I think. You're cautious, but you care." He focused on the roasting tuber to avoid her gaze. "Don't give me too much credit. I've run from plenty of responsibilities in my life. This might just be another one, if I'm honest. Maybe I just wanted to escape that station for my own reasons, and you happen to be a convenient ally." She lifted a brow at him. "We both know that's not entirely true. You risked your neck for me." Her voice was gentle, lacking accusation. "I don't need you to admit it, but I won't forget." He let out a long breath, turning the skewers to keep the tubers from burning. "Fine," he said quietly. "But don't expect heroics. My track record's not great. I've saved people, I've also let people down." He wasn't sure why he was telling her this, but something about her presence, her quiet, watchful understanding, made him want to be honest. She considered him, the flickering flames painting her features with dancing shadows. "No one's perfect. Especially not someone who's been hurt." She leaned forward slightly, wincing a bit from her injured shoulder. "But you and I, we don't have to decide everything now. Let's survive first. Then we see what else is possible." He nodded. Something eased in his chest at her words. It felt good to have someone acknowledge that it was okay not to have all the answers. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the flames and the strange twilight sky. When the tubers were ready, he split one open and handed half to her. She took it, examining it curiously, then brought it to her lips for a tentative bite. The glow under her skin shimmered in response to the new taste. Interesting. A bit bitter but edible. Could be worse," he joked. "Could taste like engine oil." She snorted softly. "I've had worse, trust me." They ate in silence, only the crackle of the small fire to fill the lull. At some point, the comforting quiet felt natural, as if they'd known each other longer than a day. The tension of near-death experiences had a way of forging strange bonds. When they finished, Taryn doused the fire, not wanting to attract any unwanted attention. The sky was now awash in deeper purples and star-flecked black. He motioned toward the open ramp of the shuttle. "We should sleep. There's only one bunk, though." He paused, feeling a rush of awkwardness. "I can take the floor." Lyra arched a delicate brow, her eyes reflecting faint amusement. "You're offering me your bed after I've known you for less than a day. Very gallant." The corner of her mouth tilted in a teasing half-smile. "I'm offering you the bunk, but not me in it. I mean, I can just find some place on the floor," he clarified, stumbling over his words. Why did she have to phrase it like that? She let out a soft chuckle, the glow along her neck brightening. "Relax, Taryn. I'm teasing you. Though I wouldn't mind sharing, if it's more comfortable. My species values warmth and closeness, especially when injured." She reached up, gingerly touching the bandage on her shoulder. "But if you're too shy, I won't insist." He swallowed hard, heat rising in his face. The idea of sharing a cramped bunk with her stirred something primal in him. He glanced away, torn between the rational part of him that screamed caution and the other part, the part that had felt electric whenever she touched him, that wanted to say yes. "It's probably better if I, keep watch," he coughed. "Right? Right," she said, and he thought he detected a hint of disappointment in her tone. But she nodded. "If that's what makes you comfortable. One of us should be on guard anyway, just in case." He exhaled, feeling tension coil inside him. "Okay, good," he said, walking up the ramp into the shuttle's narrow interior. She followed, her footsteps light behind him. He motioned toward the small bunk space near the back. "It's not much, but the padding is decent." He grabbed a spare blanket from a storage locker, tossing it onto the floor for himself. Then he settled against the cool metal wall, arms folded, trying to ignore the tug in his chest as she slipped onto the bunk with a slight grimace. She lay down carefully, turning on her uninjured side. The overhead light was dim. In that half-gloom, The glow from her skin cast subtle shifting shadows across the cabin. He could see her face turned toward him, eyes lidded, expression contemplative. "Taryn," she said quietly. "Yeah?" he asked, looking back at her, heart pounding. He realized how close they were, even in this cramped environment. If he stretched out his hand, he could almost touch her hair filaments, shining faintly in the dark. "Thank you," she murmured, "for not turning away when it got tough." He felt his throat tighten. "No problem," he managed, so softly it was almost inaudible. She gave a small nod, then closed her eyes, letting exhaustion take over. He watched her for a moment, a tumble of conflicting emotions swirling in his mind, then he leaned his head back against the wall. Sleep was elusive, but eventually it claimed him in the hush of that remote planet, with only the hum of the shuttle's life support systems and the gentle glow of the alien woman's presence for comfort. He woke to the sound of movement. Blinking against the faint lights of the cabin, he saw Lyra sitting up on the bunk, carefully rotating her injured arm. Her face was set with concentration, but she no longer looked as drawn as she had last night. He pushed himself upright. "How's it feeling?" She glanced at him. "Better. I told you we regenerate quickly. The wound's already starting to knit." She peeled back the edge of the bandage, revealing pinkish new skin tinged with the faint phosphorescence that suffused her entire body. "A few more hours, and it'll be barely a mark." He approached, a part of him still marveling at her alien physiology. "I'm glad." He hesitated, then retrieved a small container of water from a supply compartment, handing it to her. "Drink." She nodded, swallowing gratefully. He frowned at the limited rations in the shuttle. He'd need to gather more. They couldn't survive indefinitely on forage tubers and a meager water supply. "We should discuss our next move," he said, stepping back. She set the water aside, eyeing him. "Do you plan on continuing your scavenging runs, or are you thinking bigger now that the slavers might be after both of us?" His mouth twisted. "Yeah, they won't just forget. They know we exist. They saw us escape. Word travels fast. I might need to lay low for a while, maybe find a hidden port where I have a few old contacts, see if I can tweak the shuttle's signature so it's not traceable." He sighed. "I don't know. Been winging it for so long, it's hard to have a plan that lasts more than a day." She pursed her lips. "And me?" Her voice was measured, as if she was preparing for him to tell her she was on her own. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, I'm not going to kick you off here, if that's what you're worried about. You saved my hide as much as I saved yours. And, to be honest, I'd feel better knowing you're somewhere safe, too." He shrugged, trying to hide the tangle of emotions behind a casual gesture. "We can figure something out together. If you want." Her expression softened, relief and something else flickering across her features. "Thank you," she said, quiet. "That means a lot. I do want that." She stood, carefully stretching her shoulders. "Then let's see if we can find a port that's obscure enough to let us do a refit. Preferably not under corporate or slaver influence. Maybe a black market starport." Taryn considered. "There's a starport called Heli's Drift about 3 systems away. It's not exactly lawless, but they don't ask a lot of questions. Might be a good spot to lay low, find an engineer, get new registration codes. It'll cost, though, so I hope you have something to trade. My last haul didn't net me much." She frowned, patting her pockets. "I don't have much in the way of credits. But I do have a few items from my people. Some are valuable if you know who to sell them to." Her voice carried a note of sadness, as though parting with those remnants of her heritage was painful. But she straightened her shoulders, clearly committed to the plan. "Let's do that. We can be gone by midday." Nodding, Taryn tapped at the shuttle's console, checking the planetary rotation and local time. "We've got enough daylight to do a short recon of the area, see if we can scavenge anything else before we leave. I'll head out for an hour or two. You should stay here and rest, maybe run a diagnostic on the engines." Something felt off in the thruster array. She nodded, stepping up to the console with a determined look. "I can do that. Just don't take too long." We don't know if that station was able to send out a distress call or not. Taryn grabbed his pack and stepped outside, letting the ramp hiss shut behind him. The daylight, if it could be called that under the pinkish haze, was bright enough to see without a flashlight. He jogged across the canyon to where scattered rocks and boulders dotted the landscape. His scanner beeped quietly, picking up trace minerals that might be of use. Mostly worthless. But he persisted, hoping to find something that could fetch a few credits. After some time, he discovered a small deposit of crystalline rock near a dry riverbed. A quick analysis suggested it was high in a rare element used in certain starship power cells. Probably not worth a fortune, but enough to help. He hammered at it with a small tool until he pried out a few samples. As he worked, sweat dripped down his face. Though the air was cool, the thin atmosphere forced him to exert more energy. Finally, satisfied he had enough, he shouldered the pack, planning to return. He spotted a narrow cave entrance a short distance away, half hidden behind a tumble of boulders. Curiosity nudged him to check it out. Maybe there were more minerals. He ducked inside, the dimness quickly swallowing him. Using a small light, he scanned the walls. Stalactites of weirdly glowing crystals hung overhead. The floor was dusty, but there were footprints, clearly not his own, and they looked fresh. The hairs on the back of his neck rose. He crouched, examining them. Humanoid footprints, maybe from a boot. Could be old. But something about them looked recent. He eased further in, tension coiling in his chest. The air smelled stale, with a hint of something pungent, almost chemical. Around a bend, he heard a faint shuffle, like fabric against rock. He froze. The last thing he needed was a confrontation. Slowly, he backed away. But a voice echoed out of the darkness. "Who goes there?" He cursed under his breath, raising his light. "Just a traveler," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm leaving. No harm meant." A figure emerged from behind a rocky column, a woman with short-cropped hair, wearing patched-up armor and carrying a battered plasma rifle. She had an emblem on her shoulder that he vaguely recognized as belonging to an anti-slaver group, or so rumor said. She eyed him warily. "You alone?" Taryn nodded. "Just me. My ship's parked a mile or so away. I came to see if there was anything salvageable." She studied him for a long moment, then lowered her rifle fractionally. "I'm not here to cause trouble either. I'm waiting for my captain. We're doing recon. Got word slavers might be expanding operations in these parts, looking for runaways." She paused. "You see any sign of them?" He weighed whether to share. The memory of the near-death experience at the station was still fresh. "We just escaped some on a derelict outpost nearby. They were definitely active." Her jaw tightened. "Makes sense. Look, if you're heading out, you might want to stay vigilant. They've got eyes everywhere." Her gaze flicked to the crystals overhead. "I'm just here because there's a rumor they stashed contraband in these caves. My crew wants to get it before they do, or destroy it. Either way." Taryn nodded. "Hope you find it." He shifted, wanting to leave. "Look, be safe. My group's not looking for conflict." "Your group?" she repeated, narrowing her eyes. He grimaced at the slip. "Me and a friend." He didn't want to reveal Lyra's existence. "We're just passing through." She grunted. "All right. If you do see them, they're traveling in small teams, heavily armed. Don't engage alone." She stepped back, disappearing into the shadows. "Stay out of trouble." Taryn exhaled, relieved she hadn't pressed him. He hurried out of the cave, heading back toward the shuttle. As he neared, he felt the familiar surge of relief at the sight of the small craft nestled in the canyon. Lyra was outside, standing near the engine vents, a toolkit in hand. She glanced up as he approached, her expression brightening slightly. "Found anything?" He patted the side of his pack. "Some crystals that might sell. And a surprise. Someone from an anti-slaver group in the caves. They're sniffing around. Says the slavers might be more widespread in this area." Lyra's features tensed. "That's not good." She touched the bandage on her shoulder. We should leave soon. He nodded. Agreed. Let's get these crystals stashed on board and take off. He climbed into the shuttle with her behind him, setting the pack in a storage compartment. Soon, they were strapped into the cockpit seats, powering up the engines. The thrusters roared, dust swirling as they lifted off. Terran angled the craft skyward, piercing the pinkish clouds until they broke into the star-flecked void beyond. As they set a course for Halley's Drift, Lyra ran a systems check. I repaired the thruster arrays. Should hold until we can get a proper tune-up. Just don't push them too hard in a dogfight. Let's hope we don't get into one, he muttered, keying in the NAV calculations. It's a short jump. We'll be there in a few hours. He leaned back, letting the autopilot handle the main flight for now. The cabin was quiet except for the hum of the engines and the soft beep of the console. He glanced sideways, noticing how Lyra's fingers rested near his on the console. A subtle tension sparked between them again, the memory of last night's closeness returning full force. He cleared his throat. So, about Halley's Drift. People there might not be the friendliest, but they're used to outlaws and runaways. Keep your glow under wraps if you can. Folks might try to exploit it if they realize you're Lyris. She nodded. Understood. I can wear a hood or something, dim my luminescence. We do have some control over it. He found himself eyeing the faint lines on her neck. You do? So you can switch it off? She shrugged. Not entirely, but we can lower it. It's tied to our emotions, though. Intense feelings can override conscious suppression. Her lips curved into a small, ironic smile. If I'm frightened or excited, it flares up. Then she glanced at him, letting the implication hang in the air. He coughed lightly. Right. Got it. He shifted his gaze to the viewport, the swirl of starlight beyond. A comfortable silence followed, peppered with the subtle brush of her arm against his as she adjusted the controls. Something about the moment felt impossibly intimate. Two travelers alone in the vast emptiness, hearts beating in unison, each aware of the other's presence in a way that felt bigger than mere survival. Time slipped by. They engaged the warp drive for a short jump, the stars stretching into streaks of light around them. Lyra reclined in her seat, breathing slow, as if meditating. Terran stared at her for a moment, his mind drifting back to the lingering questions he had about her life, her people, her hopes. He wanted to ask more, but words felt inadequate. Instead, he let the hum of the engines cradle him into a doze. When the warp field collapsed, they emerged near a battered-looking station built around a ring of asteroids, Halley's Drift. Dim lights flickered on its outer docking arms, and a cluster of mismatched ships orbited nearby. Terran quickly re-engaged manual control, guiding the shuttle toward one of the docking platforms. Lyra peered through the viewport, eyes narrowed. Quaint, she said dryly. He laughed, a hint of nerves creeping into his voice. You could call it that. Let's see if we can find an engineer who won't ask too many questions. He radioed the station, requesting permission to dock. A brusque voice granted them berth 17 with a warning to pay the docking fee up front or face ejection into space. Terran rolled his eyes. Friendly as ever. They drifted in, locking onto the berth's mag clamps with a metallic thud. Then Terran powered down the engines. All right. Here we are. Keep your hood up. He rummaged for a worn jacket with a wide hood, offering it to her. She slipped it on, adjusting it to conceal much of her face. Her filaments and neck patterns were partially hidden, though a faint glow remained on her cheeks. They stepped out onto the docking bay, inhaling the stale air recycled through decades-old filters. The place reeked of engine fumes, sweat, and cheap booze. Crews of various species trudged back and forth, loading or unloading cargo. Nobody spared them more than a glance. Terran felt a surge of relief. At least they weren't obviously suspicious. They made their way through a dim corridor toward the main bazaar area, where merchants hawked everything from illegal weapons to questionable produce. Terran led the way to a small workshop stall, where an old acquaintance named Kren perched behind a grease-stained counter, tinkering with a coil spanner. Kren was a hulking figure with a face full of scars and a mechanical eye that whirred whenever he blinked. Taryn, Kren greeted, narrowing his one organic eye. Didn't expect to see you back here so soon. Thought you were off to greener pastures. Yeah, well, things change, Taryn said with forced nonchalance. I need a registration overhaul, thruster tune-up, maybe some new ID tags. Think you can manage? Kren grunted, eyeing Lyra's hood. Sure, if you got credits or something worth trading. I don't do charity. He tapped the workbench. Show me what you got. Taryn set down the crystals he'd collected, plus a few that Lyra handed over from her own small stash, small fragments that glowed faintly, possibly from her homeworld. Kren's eyes lit up with interest. This is Elyrus resin, isn't it? He picked up a shard that pulsed with soft luminescence. I've heard stories about this stuff. Hard to come by. Lyra remained silent, hood pulled low. Taryn shrugged. We got lucky. Will it cover what we need? Kren leaned back, obviously trying to decide if he could get more from them. But eventually he nodded. All right, I'll handle the paperwork and the tune-up. Might take a day or two, so don't go running off. If I find out you're crossing me, I'll keep the resin. He shoved a small data chip at Taryn. Here's a temporary transponder code you can load into your ship's NAV so it doesn't get flagged while it's in my care. Fair enough, Taryn said, tucking the chip away. We'll be around. He nodded at Lyra, then turned to go, ignoring the curious glare from Kren. They slipped back into the station's corridors, heading for the seedy lodging decks. We'll lay low in a room, Taryn said quietly. Keep your hood on. I don't trust these people not to try something if they suspect you're Elyrus. She gave a tight nod. I understand. Her voice was subdued, probably from the tension of being around so many strangers. Taryn found a small paper-hour bunkroom near the edge of the station, a cramped, dingy space with a single bed, a flickering light, and a door that barely locked. He used some leftover credits to pay for it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of mold, and the walls were a depressing shade of gray. But at least it was private. Lyra shoved back her hood, exhaling softly. I hate it here, she admitted. It feels wrong. Taryn grimaced. It's not exactly paradise, no. But it's a means to an end. He checked the lock on the door, then turned to see her staring at him, her luminous eyes reflecting the flickering light. She reached out, tracing a finger along a dent in the wall. Your world. My world. They all have corners like this where no one cares. People like us who slip through cracks end up in places like this. Hiding. He swallowed, something stirring in his chest at the vulnerability in her voice. For what it's worth, I'm sorry it has to be this way, he said. If I could just snap my fingers and give us both a safe home, I would. A sad smile graced her lips. I believe you. Then, without warning, she stepped closer. The cramped room left little space between them. Her gaze lifted to his, and he could see the faint glow stirring in the lines along her temples. I know it's dangerous to get close, she said softly, but I feel safe with you, in a strange way. His breath caught. He remembered her talk about closeness, about how her species valued warmth. He also remembered the electricity that shot through him whenever she brushed against him. He should have retreated, kept a buffer. But something in her eyes drew him in. He began, then hesitated, not knowing the right words. It's okay, she murmured, reading his confusion. Slowly, she slid her uninjured arm around his shoulders, drawing him close enough that her breath ghosted over his jaw. He felt an involuntary shudder, equal parts excitement and fear. Her skin was warmer than he'd expected, soft and pulsing with that gentle glow. He lifted a hand, resting it tentatively at her waist. She didn't push him away. Instead, she leaned in further. He closed his eyes, the tension in the room ratcheting higher. He could feel the quickness of her heartbeat, or maybe it was his. We shouldn't, he mumbled, though he didn't move to stop her. Maybe not, she whispered back, brushing her lips near his ear. But I want to. That simple confession lit a fuse in him. In a sudden rush, he turned his head, capturing her mouth in a tentative kiss. She responded, exhaling a soft, breathy sound that cut straight through his defenses. He twisted, pressing her gently against the wall, mindful of her injured shoulder. Her free hand slid down his back, pulling him closer. The glow under her skin intensified, illuminating the small room and pulses. He was lost in the sensation of her lips, the taste of her breath, faintly sweet with that same mineral undertone. His heart hammered in his chest. It had been ages since he'd allowed himself anything like this, real closeness, unguarded. 1,000 warnings flared in his mind about trusting a stranger, about how complicated this could get. But the heat of her body, the gentle ferocity of her mouth on his, drove reason out. She sighed against his lips. He let himself sink deeper into the moment, hands sliding up her sides, feeling the subtle ridges of the markings beneath her shirt. When she pulled back slightly, a flush of color rose to her cheeks, her eyes half-lidded. She exhaled, voice husky. "I didn't think it'd feel like that." He swallowed. "Me neither," he admitted. Hesitating, he stroked her glowing cheek. "Are you okay?" That question carried multiple meanings. Her injury, her emotions, everything. She nodded, gaze shining. "Yes. Though my species, we bond strongly when we choose to. I'm not saying that's happening right now, but there's an intensity to it. It might move faster than you're used to." He felt his stomach twist with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "I see." He breathed deep, letting the closeness wash over him. "I'm not going to run away. Just, let's keep it honest, okay?" A gentle smile tugged at her lips. "Okay." Then she rested her forehead against his, her breath warm. They stood like that for a moment, the hum of the station fading into the background, until a muffled shout from the hallway jolted them out of the moment. Taryn tensed, reflexes sharpened by years of danger. Lyra's eyes flew to the door. He cursed under his breath, stepping back. "It might just be a couple brawlers or drunks," he said quietly, but he placed a hand on his sidearm just in case. The tension in the corridor outside ebbed, replaced by footsteps thumping away. Lyra let out a breath, some of the glow fading from her skin. "We can't really relax here, can we?" she whispered. He shook his head. "No. We need to keep watch. I'll rest a bit, you rest a bit. Tomorrow, hopefully Kren finishes early, and we can get out of here." He paused, glancing at her parted lips. "I don't want to stop," he admitted softly. "But we might have to wait until we're somewhere safer." A flicker of understanding crossed her face, tinted with disappointment but also acceptance. "All right," she said. She smoothed her shirt down, her breathing still a little unsteady. "I can wait." The look she gave him was full of promise, though, making his pulse accelerate again. He nodded, forcing himself to step away. "I'll keep first watch. You try to sleep," he said, gesturing to the narrow bed. She hesitated, then acquiesced, lying down with her back to the wall, one hand tucked under her head. He dragged a rickety stool near the door, sitting with his sidearm resting across his lap. The dull overhead light buzzed. Exhaustion tugged at him, but he forced his eyes to remain open. As the hours crawled by, he kept imagining the feel of her lips, the warmth of her luminous body against him, and the heady rush of that moment. The fact that she was so different, so alien, only made it more compelling, as if everything about her was a new frontier he wanted to explore. But each time the station creaked or someone shouted in the hallway, he was reminded that they were still in danger. The slavers might track them, or some unscrupulous merchant might decide Lyra's luminescence was worth a bounty. He couldn't let his guard down. Eventually, he switched places with her, letting her watch while he dozed. In that short sleep, he dreamed of starlight dancing under her skin, of the soft, questioning way she said his name. When he woke, she was perched on the stool, watching the door. A faint half-smile tugged at her mouth as she realized he was awake. The silent exchange in the dim light spoke volumes. They had something here, fragile and electric, though it was too soon to label it. A few hours later, Taryn's comm chirped. Kren's gravelly voice came through, telling him the basic modifications were done. They could retrieve the shuttle in an hour. Taryn didn't question how Kren finished so quickly. He probably had more staff or better tech than Taryn realized. All that mattered was they could leave sooner. They left the dingy bunk room, heading for the workshop. Taryn paid a small extra fee for no further questions, and Kren handed over fresh ID tags for the shuttle, plus a new registration code. Just don't let me catch you pointing the law in my direction, Kren growled. Taryn rolled his eyes. Wouldn't dream of it. Then he and Lyra took the newly modified shuttle out of the berth, drifting away from Halley's drift before someone changed their mind about letting them go. A mixture of relief and hope settled in Taryn's gut as they soared into open space. With new codes, at least they'd be harder to trace. When they were a safe distance away, Taryn set a course for a less traveled route. They had no exact destination now, just the vague notion of finding a place where they could breathe freely. Lyra pulled her hood off, letting her glowing filaments sway. Any ideas? She asked. He shrugged. There's a network of small frontier worlds out near the Triadis belt. Law is minimal, but it's not quite as cutthroat as Halley's. We might find a place to settle for a bit. Or do a supply run somewhere. Honestly, I'm open to suggestions. She considered. I want to see if there are any rumors about other Illyris living free. If we can find them, maybe we can help each other. But I won't force you into that if you have your own plans. He studied the star map. I'm not opposed. But we'll need leads. He tapped a region of space on the holographic display, near some old trade routes. I used to know a pilot who specialized in rumor trading. She might be in one of these systems. Could ask around. Lyra nodded, her eyes brightening. That's a start. Then she leaned back, regarding him. Thank you for doing this. He swallowed, feeling a strange tenderness bloom inside him. Hey, I'm not entirely altruistic. If we help your people, maybe we can stick it to the slavers. And I have plenty of reasons to hate them, too. He forced a crooked smile. Besides, you're stuck with me. She reached over, lightly taking his hand. I could think of worse fates, she murmured. The contact sent a subtle jolt through him, that same thrilling warmth. He squeezed her fingers, letting the silence say what he couldn't put into words yet. For the next several days, they traversed star lanes, jumping from system to system. The quiet hours in the shuttle forced them into a comfortable routine, scanning for threats, checking supplies, trading off watch shifts, and more often, sharing soft, lingering moments in the cramped bunk or brushing past each other in the corridor, letting touches linger. The attraction was undeniable, woven with a growing emotional connection. Each time they kissed, Taryn felt that protective wall inside him crack a little more, replaced by a heady mixture of longing and worry. If he let himself fall for her completely, what happened if something tore them apart? Yet day by day, that fear was overshadowed by the simple joy of having her around. She taught him a few words in her native tongue, each laced with subtle shifts of luminescence that indicated nuance. He showed her how to calibrate the ship's sensors. They bantered about the smallest things, like how human music was too loud, or how her glowing hair kept him awake at night, to which she teased that his snoring was worse. On a particularly quiet evening, after a sparse meal of rehydrated rations, Taryn found himself in the bunk with Lyra, the small reading light casting long shadows on the curved walls. She snuggled against him, uninjured arm curled over his chest, her face tucked into the crook of his neck. We should talk about that question, she whispered, eyes flicking up to meet his. He blinked. Which question? Her lips curved. The question about pulling out. She traced a slow circle on his chest. I'm trying to learn everything about you humans, remember? The playful glint in her eyes and the subtle glow that suffused her cheeks told him she was half joking, half serious. He felt a surge of warmth that was both embarrassment and desire. We already covered that, he said, voice low. Didn't we? Not in depth, she teased. Her breath grew softer, lips brushing his ear. But in all seriousness, Taryn, I want to understand your ways. We're sharing a bed. I can feel your heart racing sometimes when we kiss. I don't want there to be any misunderstandings if. She left the sentence hanging, the meaning obvious. If they went further. He swallowed, hands resting at her waist. You won't get any misunderstandings from me. I'm pretty sure you know when I'm turned on, he added wryly, and she let out a soft laugh. Yes, I do, she said, the glow intensifying along her neck. We just do things differently, that's all. Our species, we have certain, shall we say, mating rhythms that center around luminous displays. It can be overwhelming for humans, or so I'm told. But I don't want to scare you. He met her gaze, feeling his pulse thunder in his ears. You don't scare me. Not like that. I just don't want to rush you, or take advantage of any heightened emotions from the danger we've been in. She considered that, pressing closer. That's fair. Her voice hushed. But at some point, we might not be able to hold back. Our bodies, our hearts, they might not let us. And in that moment, I'd want you to be clear on what to expect. His breath caught in his throat. This was territory he hadn't navigated before, not with a human woman, and definitely not with a luminous, alien partner whose biology might intensify everything. Yet the prospect sent a thrilling shiver along his skin. I'll try to keep up, he managed, half joking, half serious. She smiled against his neck, dropping a kiss on his collarbone. That's all I ask? Then she settled in, her body molding to his, and the comforting glow lulled him. In that safe, dim space, they drifted toward sleep. Though neither said it out loud, they both knew the bond between them was deepening, forging a connection that was more than just a fleeting fling. Each day brought them closer to a point of no return. Their next stop was a remote fueling station near the Triadus belt. They needed to top up before pressing on. The station was a ragtag cluster of metal pods strapped together with scaffolding, orbiting a barren moon. Taryn docked carefully, paying a steep fee for the fuel. Money was running thin. Lyra stayed on board, hood up, while Taryn handled the transaction. Once done, he returned to the shuttle, but just before sealing the hatch, he noticed a small flicker of movement at the edge of his vision. He tensed, stepping onto the platform to see who might be watching. But no one seemed to be there. Maybe he was being paranoid. With everything that had happened, he was always on edge. Satisfied that no immediate threat loomed, he closed the hatch and strode to the cockpit, letting out a breath. Lyra gave him a questioning look. Thought I saw someone lurking. But probably nothing, he muttered. Let's just get out of here. He engaged the engines, pulling away from the fueling station. As they accelerated into the belt, he noticed something odd on the scanner. A small, faint blip, trailing behind them. Huh, he said, frowning. Lyra leaned over the console. What is it? Not sure. Could be a rock. The belt is full of debris. He set the scanner to active ping, but the object vanished from the readout. He exhaled. I guess it's nothing. She rubbed his shoulder reassuringly. Relax. You're tense. Her presence soothed him somewhat, but the feeling of being watched lingered in the back of his mind. They threaded through the belt, heading for a sector known for scattered frontier colonies. Taryn had an old friend, Malin, who might have leads on Lyra's refugees. As they cleared the densest part of the asteroid field, Lyra ran a scan. I'm picking up a small vessel, looks like it's on a parallel course. Taryn's nerves spiked. Coordinates? She read them off. It's still quite a distance away. Might just be someone heading the same direction. But the tightening of her jaw said she shared his worry. Sure enough, a few hours later, that same vessel crept closer, still trailing. Taryn's mind leapt to the slavers. Or maybe Kren sold them out. He cursed under his breath, quickly calculating possible escape routes. Hold on, he told Lyra, punching the engines into a higher burn. The shuttle vibrated. The unknown vessel matched the acceleration. A shot of adrenaline kicked through Taryn's veins. This is not a coincidence, he growled. We can't outrun them for long with these thrusters. We need a plan. She squared her shoulders. We could ambush them if we find an asteroid field or a nebula to hide in. Taryn scanned the star map. There's a dense gas cloud about half a parsec away, Could use it to mask our energy signature. He changed course, angling the shuttle toward the swirling mass of cosmic dust. The trailing vessel followed. Terran's heartbeat thundered. He felt Lyra's hand on his arm, her grip steady. They plunged into the cloud, the shuttle's sensors going haywire with static. Now we're blind, Terran muttered, flipping to manual controls. He slowed to a near crawl, trying to keep from colliding with hidden debris. The swirling dust outside the viewport created an eerie red haze. They might come in after us or wait us out. Lyra set her jaw. Let them come. I won't go back to hiding, Terran. The glow in her eyes was fierce, reflecting the swirling lights beyond. Time stretched. The shuttle drifted in the thick of the cloud. Then a faint energy spike registered on the short-range scanner. They're here, Terran said. He powered the small undercarriage turret. We only get 1 or 2 shots before we overheat. A flicker of movement registered. The other ship was close, too close. Terran angled the shuttle around, scanning the haze. His pulse hammered. Suddenly, a bright lance of plasma tore through the fog, grazing the shuttle's port side. Lyra yelped, bracing herself. Alarms blared. Shield capacity down to 60%, she shouted. Terran bared his teeth. Hang on. He jerked the controls, weaving them around a clump of drifting rock. Another plasma burst lit up the haze. Terran spun the turret, returning fire. The shot streaked wide, illuminating the swirling dust in a brilliant flash. The enemy ship banked away. He caught a glimpse of a predatory silhouette, smaller than he'd expected. Could it be slavers, or a bounty hunter? We can't fight them head-on, Lyra hissed. We'll lose. She grabbed the targeting controls, aligning them for another quick shot. Terran hammered the thrusters, pushing the shuttle deeper into the cloud. He tried a feint, dropping their altitude, letting the haze thicken, swirling in chaotic patterns. The vessel reappeared on the scanner at close range. A final volley from their cannons slammed into the shuttle's rear thruster. Sparks flew from the console. Lyra bit back a cry, clinging to the seat. Terran roared in frustration. We're not going down like this! He jammed the turret control, unleashing a full-powered plasma bolt in the direction of the muzzle flare. The shot cut through the haze, striking something solid. A small explosion flared, followed by crackling static on the sensors. The enemy ship reeled, drifting out of formation. Terran seized the moment, surging forward, clearing the cloud's boundary in a wild lurch. The starfield opened up before them, and he gunned the engines to maximum burn, ignoring the redlining indicators. Behind them, the enemy ship didn't reappear. Perhaps they were crippled or decided it wasn't worth continuing the chase. Terran's arms shook from the tension. Lyra slumped in her seat, eyes wide. We made it, she whispered, voice trembling with relief. He nodded, breathing hard. Barely. He dialed down the thrusters, letting the shuttle coast. We need repairs again. Damn it! He glared at the sensor readouts. The rear thruster was damaged, but not beyond functionality. The hull integrity was compromised at the port side. They'd be lucky to limp to the nearest outpost. Who the hell was that? Lyra closed her eyes, pressing a hand to her chest. I don't know. Could be mercenaries. Or maybe someone else out for a bounty. Terran snarled. We have to keep moving. That's all we can do. They plotted a course for the nearest star system with a habitable planet, hoping to find a place to conduct emergency repairs. As they traveled, the mood in the shuttle was grim, the near miss reawakening the ever-present fear that haunted them. But amid that fear, Terran felt something else, a fierce protectiveness toward Lyra. He reached over, clasping her hand. She gripped his tightly. No words were needed. Both knew they'd do anything to keep the other safe. The planet they found was a lush, green orb named Tarsia, known for scattered research stations and a moderate climate. They landed in a secluded glade near a research outpost. Terran hobbled the shuttle down, wincing at the screech of stressed metal. Once the engines powered off, smoke billowed from a vent. He jumped out, scanning the damage. We took a beating, he muttered. Lyra followed, gaze flicking over the scorched thruster. Can we fix it? He ran a hand through his hair. I can try patching it up. Might take a few days of work. If the outpost has a parts store, maybe we can trade. He sighed, noticing how her face paled at the mention of more trade. Let's see what they have. They ventured through thick foliage, the air sweet with alien blossoms. The ground squished under their boots. Lyra looked around in wonder, her glowing markings shifting in subtle patterns as the sunlight filtered through broad leaves. It's beautiful, she breathed, pausing to rest a hand on a tree trunk that sparkled with golden bark. So alive! Taryn gave a weary smile. It is. Maybe we can enjoy it for a little bit, once we know we're safe. They pushed on, following a path that led to a small collection of prefab buildings. The outpost sign read, Tarsia Bioresearch, Independent Sector. A bored-looking guard stood near the entrance. He barely glanced at them, more interested in his portable game device. Taryn cleared his throat. Excuse me, is there a mechanic or supply depot here? The guard shrugged. Talk to Marone. She handles trades for the outpost. She's in Building 3. He jerked his chin toward a squat structure. They found Marone, a middle-aged researcher with a tool belt slung over her waist, rummaging through crates in a storage area. Taryn explained the damage, emphasizing they just needed some parts to patch the thruster. Marone eyed them suspiciously at first, but softened when Taryn offered some leftover crystals plus labor in exchange. He claimed he'd help fix any equipment around the outpost. All right, Marone agreed finally. I can spare a few parts, but you'll have to pitch in. We've got a greenhouse with a faulty climate regulator. If you can fix it, I'll throw in a discount. Taryn forced a grin. Deal. He squeezed Lyra's hand discreetly, relieved they had a plan. For the next few days, Taryn toiled away repairing the shuttle and fulfilling his end of the bargain with Marone. Lyra assisted, learning quickly. In quiet moments, they explored the lush surroundings, marveling at the waterfalls and the glowing insects that danced at twilight. At night, they returned to the shuttle, which now rested more securely thanks to Taryn's repairs. Each evening felt like a small reprieve from their constant flight. The fear was still there, but so was the steady companionship. They cooked simple meals from local produce, savoring the chance to eat something fresh. They talked about their pasts. Taryn confessed a bit about the war that had stolen his trust, about the friends he'd lost. Lyra shared stories of her homeworld's crystal forests, and the rites her people practiced to honor their ancestors. One such evening found them by a small campfire near the shuttle, the glow of the fire mingling with the luminous patterns on Lyra's skin. Taryn strummed a makeshift tune on a battered instrument he'd found in the research outpost's junk pile. He'd never been a great musician, but it was enough to fill the silence. Lyra watched him with a gentle smile, her eyes reflecting the flames. He set the instrument aside, leaning closer to her. She met him halfway, pressing her lips to his in a slow, lingering kiss that built on every unspoken emotion between them. This time, either held back. Their hands tangled in each other's hair, their breaths growing ragged. When they finally broke apart, her cheeks flushed, lines blazing bright, she whispered, I think I'm ready. He froze, heart pounding. Ready for what? She brushed her fingers along the side of his face, the contact sending sparks through him. To share more, she said softly. My body, my heart. If you are. Her voice trembled with vulnerability. He exhaled, feeling heat coil in his gut. Yes, he breathed. But only if you're sure. And only if we find a place that's. She silenced him with another kiss, deeper this time, her mouth warm and insistent. This place is quiet enough. We have the night. You and I, we might not get another chance soon. Her words were laced with urgency, but also a sweetness that made his chest ache. He glanced around. The jungle growth formed a natural curtain, and the only lights came from the stars above and the campfire's flicker. He met her gaze again. The luminous lines had shifted, swirling over her skin in mesmerizing patterns, betraying her heightened emotions. He gently traced the edge of her collarbone, feeling her shiver. Okay, he said quietly, letting the reality wash over him? He rose, offering her his hand. She took it, and he guided her a few steps away from the fire, into the soft glow of the shuttle's open hatch. The interior lights were dim, the bunk area still small, but enough for them to share. She closed the hatch behind them, effectively sealing them in private darkness. In that hush, she stepped in close, pressing her forehead to his. "Trust me," she whispered. He nodded, threading his fingers through her glowing filaments. Her breath caught, and the lines along her neck flared. Inch by inch, they shed the barriers between them, his jacket, her shirt, the tension of secrets left unsaid. In the dim glow of her body, he watched as every inch of her skin lit up with a radiant pattern that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. It was unlike anything he'd experienced, an intimate dance of light and warmth. He moved slowly, exploring her with careful touches, mindful of her shoulders still healing from the graze. She matched him, her hands roaming his body, each caress fueling the blazing connection. When they finally pressed together, her breath trembled with anticipation, and he felt his own chest tight with longing. Soft words were exchanged, half inaudible gasps. The closeness felt both comforting and electric, a raw exposure of heart and body. Their lips met again, a silent vow passing between them, consent, eagerness, the promise to respect each other's boundaries while also surrendering to the moment. As they sank to the bunk, the intensity of her glow grew, painting the small cabin in ripples of light. He lost himself in the sensation of her skin against his, the heady mix of newness and tenderness. She guided his hand along the luminescent lines that traced her torso, showing him how they brightened under his touch. The flicker of discovery sparked a deeper hunger in both of them. Soon, the small space filled with soft murmurs and whispered names. He found himself whispering her name repeatedly, caught in the tidal wave of her body's responses. At times, her alien biology surprised him, a slight ridging here, a phosphorescent flush there, but he adapted, following her cues, learning the language of her pleasure. She, in turn, explored him with the same curiosity, her breath hitching whenever he revealed a vulnerable spot. The more they shared, the more the tension shifted into an intoxicating harmony. Their hearts pounded in sync, sweat mingling with the gentle glow, each caress an affirmation that they had a right to this closeness, to this fragile piece of paradise amid a galaxy that had shown them so much cruelty. When they finally reached the crescendo of their union, her luminescence flared in a dazzling surge, momentarily flooding the cabin with bright, shimmering light. He gasped, eyes wide, overwhelmed by the sheer beauty of it. In that instant, he felt more connected to her than to anyone in his entire life. It was as if the boundaries of their separate bodies blurred, and for one breathless heartbeat, they were one entity, lost in a shared pulse of existence. Then the light subsided to a gentle glow, and she collapsed against him, breathless and trembling, tears of what looked like joy or relief glistening in her luminous eyes. He cradled her close, his own breathing ragged, mind swirling with emotion. He kissed her forehead, tasting salt where tears might have been. "You're amazing," he whispered, still in awe. She let out a shaky laugh that dissolved into a satisfied hum. "That was intense," she breathed. She nestled into his side, the bunk far too small to accommodate them comfortably, but neither cared. They just lay entwined, hearts gradually slowing, her luminescence flickering in aftershocks against his skin. For a long time, they stayed there, half floating in the warmth of that shared intimacy. Words were unnecessary. He stroked her hair filaments, marveling at how they curled around his fingers. She traced lazy patterns on his chest, the faint glow under her fingertips mesmerizing in the dim. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he worried about the future, the slavers, the constant running, but in that moment, it was drowned out by the present beauty of what they'd discovered together. Eventually, she spoke, voice hushed. "Now do you see why I was so curious about your human customs? Why that phrase, pulling out, had me intrigued? There's so much to learn." He chuckled softly, feeling the rumble in his chest. "I think we learned something a lot more important tonight than that." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "This is a whole new world for me, Lyra." She smiled against his skin, her body a pliant warmth against his side. "For me as well." she said gently. And I think I like it. They drifted into slumber wrapped in each other, lulled by the hum of the station outside, the flicker of the distant campfire, and the lingering echoes of their shared passion. Dawn was just a few hours away, but for that short slice of time, they found safety in each other's arms, no longer alone in the darkness of the galaxy. When the new morning's sunlight filtered through the shuttle window, Lyra stirred, pressing closer to Taryn with a contented sigh. He woke to the gentle warmth of her glow, and her hair brushing his chin. For a moment, he just watched her, memorizing the graceful slope of her cheek and the way her lips parted softly in sleep. He could almost believe they were far from any danger, living a peaceful life. But the reality crashed down as soon as he recalled the battered thruster, the persistent threat of slavers, and the uncertain future. Still, he found himself smiling as she blinked awake, her alien eyes focusing on his face. She returned his smile, and he felt that familiar surge of warmth. Whatever else happened, they had this moment. They dressed slowly, exchanging soft touches. Outside, birds with iridescent feathers hopped through the glade, pecking at the ground for food. Taryn stepped out into the fresh air, taking a deep breath. Lyra joined him, weaving her fingers through his. Feels good, she murmured. Even if it's just for a little while. He nodded, scanning the greenery. The looming question, of course, was, what next? They could linger, but eventually they'd have to move on. He wasn't naive enough to think the slavers had given up. I finished most of the repairs, he said. We should test the thrusters soon. She pursed her lips. I'll grab some water from the stream. We can fill our canteens before we go. She headed off, a gentle sway in her step that made him grin despite the weight on his mind. He took the opportunity to finalize some wiring in the engine compartment, frowning at the blackened scorch marks. At least it was stable enough to fly, if they weren't attacked again. A short while later, Lyra returned with water, a thoughtful look on her face. I've been thinking, she said. Maybe we can't keep running forever. I want to actually do something about the slavers. There must be groups out there resisting them. He closed the panel and turned to face her. There are. Problem is, they're often underfunded, disorganized, or up against corporate backing. It's complicated. But yeah, there are pockets of resistance. She bit her lip. I know I'm just one Illyris, but my people have been scattered by these slavers and their corporate allies. If there's a way to unite them, or at least strike back, I want to help. He studied her determined expression. I get it. And maybe we can find a way. But we need more resources, a plan, allies. Right now, it's just you and me. He reached out, tucking a glowing filament behind her ear. I'm not opposed, Lyra. But we have to be smart. I don't want to lose you in some reckless fight. She covered his hand with hers. I understand. We'll be careful. The promise hung between them, a fragile hope. She glanced at the shuttle. Should we take off? Yeah. Let's see if this crate can still fly. They climbed into the cockpit, strapping in. Taryn fired up the engines, holding his breath at the rumbling cough from the thrusters. For a moment, it seemed they might sputter out, but then the engines steadied. He shared a relieved look with Lyra. We're good, he said, guiding the shuttle into the air. The lush landscape fell away beneath them, replaced by the shining curve of Tarsia's horizon. As they rose higher, a flicker of movement on the scanner made Taryn tense. Another ship? But it was just a small local transport. He let out a breath. I'm getting jumpy, he admitted. You have good reason, she replied softly, resting her hand on his shoulder. But we'll be okay. They cleared atmosphere and launched into space. Taryn set a course for the outskirts of the Triadus belt. But before they could jump to warp, the comm crackled. He frowned, checking the ID. Unknown. Instinct told him to ignore it, but curiosity won out. He opened a channel. A distorted voice came through the speaker. If you want to stop running, we have an offer for you. Meet us at coordinates 77 Alpha in the belt. Come alone. Or don't come at all. The line cut off. Lyra stared, her glow flickering. That's ominous. Who are they? Tarrant shook his head, a sour feeling in his gut. No idea. But they said if we're tired of running, maybe they know who we are. Could be a trap. Or maybe someone from that anti-slaver group you saw in the cave. They might have followed us, Lyra pointed out. Could be a chance to find an ally. He drummed his fingers on the console. We risk flying right into a setup. But if it's legit, we could gain a powerful friend. I guess we won't know unless we go. She took a steadying breath. Your call. I'll follow your lead. His gaze lingered on her, heart pounding with the weight of the decision. Then we go. Carefully. He punched in the coordinates, pivoting the shuttle. A swirl of conflicting emotions filled him. Fear, excitement, hope that maybe they could do more than just survive. The Triadus Belt was a chaotic region of space, filled with asteroids and drifting wreckage from old battles. Navigating it required intense focus. The coordinates led them to a large asteroid that had been hollowed out, lights glowing faintly near a hidden hangar entrance. Tarrant guided the shuttle inside, scanning for signs of hostility. No turrets aimed at them, no immediate docking clamps seized them. They touched down on a small landing pad. A single figure stood waiting in the pressurized hangar, wearing simple clothes but carrying a sidearm. Lyra and Tarrant exited slowly, arms raised to show they weren't a threat. The figure nodded, stepping forward. A woman with tan skin and a buzz cut, eyes sharp as she sized them up. You came. Good. Name's Kellen. Follow me. She turned on her heel. They exchanged a glance and followed, tension coiling in Tarrant's gut. Kellen led them through a dim corridor into a makeshift operations room. Several monitors displayed star charts, lists of known slaver routes, images of suspected corporate safe houses. A handful of others, humans and a couple of different alien species, sat at consoles or hunched over battered data pads. The vibe was one of defiance, a ragtag cell of freedom fighters. A tall man stepped forward, arms folded. I'm ROQ. Kellen here says you had a run-in with slavers at that derelict station. He jerked his chin at Tarrant. And we know you helped an Illyris escape. His gaze flicked to Lyra. We're building a coalition to strike back. You interested, or do we toss you back out the airlock? Tarrant bristled at the hostility, but Lyra laid a calming hand on his arm. She stepped forward, pulling her hood down so they could see her luminous filaments. I'm Lorana. Yes, we escaped slavers. I'd like to help fight them, if that's truly your aim. The group exchanged glances. Aroku's face softened slightly. We've been gathering intel, sabotaging shipments, rescuing captives when we can. But we're small. Underfunded. If you join us, you'll be in constant danger. Tarrant cleared his throat. We're already in danger. Might as well make it count for something. Aroku gave a curt nod. All right then. We'll vet you. Prove your loyalty, and we'll see what role you can play. In the meantime, you can stay here, keep your ship in our hangar. We could use an extra pilot. Lyra looked at Tarrant, her eyes shining with cautious excitement. This could be what we've been waiting for, she said under her breath. He nodded, heart pounding. We'll do it. But if this is some kind of con, we're out. Aroku smirked. Fair enough. He gestured for Kellen to show them around. As they followed her deeper into the asteroid base, Tarrant squeezed Lyra's hand. They were stepping onto a new, more dangerous path. But they were doing it together. They were given a small set of quarters, a cramped room with 2 bunks, a shared console, and not much else. Better than some places they'd stayed. Kellen dropped off a bag of supplies and left without much ceremony. Once alone, Tarrant let out a breath. Lyra perched on one of the bunks. You okay? She asked, luminous eyes studying him. He rubbed his temples. I'm not sure. Joining a rebel cell? That's a step I never imagined I'd take. She nodded, reaching out a hand. He took it, letting her pull him down onto the bunk beside her. She slid an arm around him, and he leaned into the comfort of her touch. We wanted to do more than run, she reminded. Now we can. But if it gets too dangerous... He silenced her with a soft kiss. It's already dangerous. So let's give it a shot. She smiled against his lips, and for a moment, they let themselves revel in the closeness that had become their anchor. The hum of the bass, the muffled clank of machinery, it all faded in that tender exchange. In the weeks that followed, they trained and worked alongside the rebel cell. Terran piloted smuggling runs, ferrying supplies to hidden outposts, evading corporate patrols. Lyra helped decode slaver transmissions, using her knowledge of alien tongues. The base bustled with activity, spies returned with intel, mechanics tinkered with stolen ships. Each day they learned more about the vast network of slavers, the cruelty inflicted on countless species, the corporate interests behind it all. Between missions, Terran and Lyra found solace in each other. They shared a bunk in the cramped quarters, waking each morning tangled in limbs and luminous filaments, finding brief moments of joy in an otherwise grim fight. Their relationship deepened, built on trust forged in adversity, and love discovered in the bleak corners of the galaxy. One day, ROQ summoned them to a briefing room. "We have a lead on a major slave transport route," he said, eyes grave. "There's an opportunity to intercept them, free the prisoners, and deal a blow to their operation. It won't be easy. They've got corporate backing, and will be heavily outgunned." Terran glanced at Lyra. She squared her shoulders. "I'm in," she said without hesitation. Aroki nodded. "We'll need your shuttle. You'll be part of a strike team. Kellen will be with you. We'll coordinate a distraction while you board the transport." He tapped a hollow map. "Odds aren't good, but it's worth trying." Preparations consumed the base. Weapons were checked, volunteers recruited. Terran felt that old adrenaline spike returning, the same fear from his scavenger days, but also the fierce resolve not to fail Lyra or the captives they aimed to save. The night before the mission, he and Lyra lay awake in their bunk, arms wrapped around each other. Neither spoke much, just held on tight, hearts racing with anticipation. When the time came, they launched with a small fleet of stolen fighters and one battered freighter disguised as a merchant vessel. The plan: lure the slavers into an ambush near a remote shipping lane. Terran's shuttle carried Kellen and two others, armed to the teeth. Lyra manned the co-pilot seat, scanning the NAV for the target. Tension crackled over the calm channels as they waited in the cover of an asteroid field. Finally, the target appeared, a bulky transport ship, escorted by two armed frigates. The rebel cell's fighters swarmed, drawing the frigates away in a chaotic dogfight. Amid the mayhem, Terran sped toward the transport, weaving through laser fire. Kellen fired the shuttle's turret, taking out a turret on the transport's hull. A well-placed EMP grenade from a rebel fighter disabled the transport's main thrusters, leaving it adrift. Terran locked onto a docking port. The hatch sealed with a clang, and Kellen's team forced the door open, guns raised. Inside, slaver guards fought back, but they were overwhelmed by the rebels' surprise attack. Terran stuck close to Lyra as they advanced through the cramped corridors. Alarm klaxons blared, red lights pulsing. Lyra's luminous patterns glowed in the flickering gloom as she fired a stun pistol at a guard. Terran's heart thundered. This was more intense than he'd ever faced, but he refused to lose nerve. They reached a sealed chamber. Kellen placed a shaped charge on the door. With a deafening blast, the panel buckled. Inside were rows of cage cells, filled with captives of multiple species, gaunt faces, fearful eyes. Lyra gasped at the sight, tears brimming. "So many," she whispered. Kellen and the rebels began cutting open the cages. The prisoners stumbled out, some crying in relief. Terran helped an elderly man from a cell, noticing the brand marks on his wrists. Across the chamber, Lyra gently supported a wounded Illyris woman, luminous patterns dulled by malnutrition. A swirl of anger and compassion tightened Terran's chest. This was why they were here. Suddenly, an alarm beeped. Enemy reinforcements inbound. Over the comm, ROQ's voice crackled, ordering a retreat. The frigates had regrouped, and more slaver ships were jumping in. "Get those prisoners out now!" he roared. Chaos erupted as Terran guided the freed captives toward the shuttle. Kellen covered their retreat, gunning down rushing slaver troopers. Smoke filled the corridors. The deck shook under heavy fire. Terran ushered the last group aboard, scanning desperately for Lyra. She appeared at the hatch, half carrying the wounded Illyris. He grabbed them both, pulling them in. "Go, go!" Kellen shouted, slamming the hatch. Terran sprinted to the cockpit, ignoring the pleas of terrified captives in the cramped interior. Lyra collapsed into the co-pilot's seat, panting. "We're all aboard," she gasped. He gunned the engines, detaching from the transport. Outside, the dogfight raged. One rebel fighter spiraled away, trailing flames. Terran clenched his jaw, weaving through the crossfire. Kellen manned the turret, firing at any slaver ships that strayed too close. They took a hit to the port side. Smoke spewed from the console. Terran cursed, rerouting power to the thrusters. Finally, they cleared the immediate battle zone, jumping to faster-than-light with a gut-lurching jolt. The swirl of warp enveloped them, leaving the chaos behind. In the cockpit, Terran stared at the swirling starlines, chest heaving. He turned to Lyra. She was trembling, tears streaking her cheeks. Without hesitation, he reached for her, pulling her into a fierce embrace. She held on tight, burying her face against his neck. Kellen's voice sounded from behind, shaky but triumphant. "We did it! We actually did it! These people, we saved them!" Terran closed his eyes, relief flooding him. They had defied the odds. The jump ended, depositing them near a rendezvous point where the rebel cell's base had relocated. The battered fleet limped in, but the mood crackled with victorious energy. Every life they saved was a blow against the slavers. When the shuttle landed, medics rushed to help the wounded captives. Terran and Lyra stepped onto the deck, exhaustion weighing them down. ROQ approached, nodding curtly. "Good work." He gestured to the freed prisoners being escorted away. "You gave them another chance. That's what we're about." His stern face twitched into the ghost of a smile. Then he cleared his throat, turning back to the command center. Terran looked at Lyra, who was still weeping softly, overwhelmed. He gathered her into his arms, pressing his lips to her forehead. "We did good," he whispered, the magnitude of their achievements slowly sinking in. She nodded, luminous eyes shining with a fragile hope. "It feels worth it," she said haltingly. "All the running, the danger, we actually helped them." He brushed away a tear from her cheek. "And this is just the start." In the days that followed, they helped the newly freed captives recover and find shelter among the rebels. Lyra spent long hours with the rescued Illyris, learning their stories and connecting them with resources. Terran assisted in patching up the battered ships, preparing for the next strike. Their bond grew stronger, each shared moment in the cramped bunk or whispered conversation forging a deeper intimacy. Nights found them entwined, hearts pounding with passion but also with the knowledge that they were carving out a new life together, one that mattered. Eventually, ROQ convened the cell to discuss the next major operation. They'd uncovered intel on a hidden corporate base that funded the slavers. As Terran and Lyra joined the briefing, they exchanged a look. This was now their fight too. They had a place here. Despite the fear and the uncertainty, they had found purpose, and they had found each other. Hand in hand, they listened to the plan, exchanging determined glances with their fellow rebels. In that moment, Terran felt a sense of belonging he'd never experienced before. Lyra squeezed his hand, luminous patterns flickering across her skin. He squeezed back, heart brimming with gratitude that in this vast galaxy, in the midst of chaos and cruelty, he'd found not just survival, but love, and a cause worth fighting for. And he knew, as her gaze met his with unwavering devotion, that neither of them would face the darkness alone ever again.